So, Ashes of Creation recently released on Steam Early Access. Currently, as of making this video, the reviews are 55% positive in English and 63% positive across all languages, leaving it at mixed overall, and I certainly have some thoughts. In this video, I'll share with you my first impressions and experiences with the game so far, as someone who's been covering the development of Ashes since the very beginning. Not gonna lie, my early impressions were not good, and I can completely understand why sentiment around this Steam Early Access release has been so negative. That being said, after persisting with the game after the initial launch, I have personally gone from having a pretty bad experience and questioning if this game is even going to be something for me, to now where I'm actually having a fairly decent time despite the game's issues after I learned more about how it works and how I should approach it as someone who's gone into it mostly solo. We're going to cover a lot of topics in this video, but first, let's start with my experiences with the game so far. I'll add timestamps in the video description for you to hop around to my specific thoughts on things. But first, support the content by listening to today's sponsor. Raid Shadow Legends, the turn-based RPG that I'm sure pretty much every one of you has heard of at this point. Right now in Raid there's a brand new crossover with Assassin's Creed, and if you download Raid using my link and log in for 7 days, you'll unlock a free legendary champion, Ezio. It's a limited time event, so make sure to grab him before it's over. Alongside Ezio, Raid is also bringing in 4 more legendary assassins from across the Assassin's Creed series for a limited time. Ezio plays exactly how you'd expect an OG assassin to play. You apply debuffs, weakening enemies, and piercing their defenses with strikes from his hidden blade. I play Raid myself from time to time, and Ezio is the kind of champion that feels strong and flexible right out of the gate. Download Raid through my link or QR code and you'll get the best start ever in this game. Not only will you get Ezio for free after logging in for 7 days, you'll also get the super overpowered Tholin Foulbeard as soon as you download the game through my link. You'll also get Venomage on level 15 and one of the best revivers, Rektor Draff, when you reach level 30. This is the start I could have only dreamed of when starting Raid. There's also dedicated events, tournaments and summon boosts running during the crossover if you want to recruit the other Assassin's Creed champions. But no matter how you play it, grabbing Ezio for free is something you really don't want to miss, so click the link and download Raid now. So Ashes launched to Steam Early Access on December 12, 2025. I actually decided against playing this game at launch because MMO launches are almost always a complete mess. Even for finished games, I'd expect long queues, bugs, disconnects, and server instability. Ashes isn't a finished MMO, so I knew the Steam Early Access launch was going to be rough. And it was. People had problems connecting their Steam account to their Intrepid account, massive login queues, disconnects, leaving the Ashes launcher open counted towards your Steam playtime, so some people couldn't refund the game by the time they got through the queue. I'm glad I didn't have to deal with any of that. I logged in 3 days later to a less populated server and I connected straight away with no problems. At this point I hadn't logged into the Ashes Alpha 2 for many months, so going into this I was expecting some big changes to the new player experience. I was disappointed pretty much straight away that the character creation hasn't changed too much from the last time I played, and I still think that compared to other MMOs the characters don't really look that good. Hopefully this is something they can improve on later in development. I chose the Riverlands starting experience and I zone into Lionhold at night time. For whatever reason, the nighttime visuals in Ashes have always looked especially bad to me. Going into this, I was expecting the graphics to look a lot better if Intrepid felt confident enough to launch on Steam Early Access to a mass audience. I'd say for the first few hours, I was disappointed with the game's overall visuals and art style, and in its current state it doesn't look like a next-gen MMO. In fact, out of all of the Unreal Engine 5 MMOs, Ashes of Creation currently looks the worst. When people say this game looks like something from 2012, it's hard to disagree with them. However, there is actually a very good reason for why this game's graphics currently look the way they do. Ashes of Creation is the only MMO in development that's constantly upgrading to the latest version of Unreal Engine. It's currently on version 5.7, but for a game to focus on graphical fidelity, it needs to lock the engine version and focus on both optimizing graphics and performance. I actually had no idea that this was why the game's graphics look so bad until I asked this question in a recent dev livestream. This answer from Jacob made a lot of sense.
Can I add more to that question from Lazy Peon? They wanted to know when will they see improvements to The game's visual / graphics, like nighttime, even on max. Take it away, Jacob, on the visuals.
No, it's cool. I just think that like it might be a little bit of an education opportunity. The pendulum swings between fidelity and performance frequently in large scale products like this. If this was a box product that had its own locked engine for X amount of years, and they were, rendering engineers pumping for 5 years just to get the hair to work on Zero Dawn, things like that. Those are interesting. That's great. I really appreciate those games and that type of development. And what everybody's seeing and what everybody's experiencing is we swung the pendulum towards performance and accessibility. And we did that on purpose, right? And that does come at a cost. And some of that cost is the visual fidelity that we see through the shaders, through the rendering pipeline in Unreal. Like there's a non-trivial amount of work to do to be able to make it better. And it matters. It matters to us. It matters to you. I know it matters to you. We all want the best looking, best performant product. And that pendulum will continue to swing. The amount of distance between the pendulum swinging is the thing that will inform like how close we are to feeling good about it. Right now, I don't know that anybody here is super satisfied with the way that it looks. We are more satisfied with the way that it runs. And that pendulum will continue to swing back and forth. So that was the point I wanted to make there.
So graphical fidelity aside, I continue with the new player starting experience, which was a lot more streamlined and definitely better than before. You get your horse fairly quickly, and I'd say from levels 1 to 5, it was a good experience. One new addition I especially liked for the new player experience was the addition of the Destiny menu, which complemented the tutorial really well. It makes you want to try out different aspects of the game to get those early rewards. I do, however, think they should expand Destinies to include crafting a rowboat, trying out some sport fishing, and obtaining your first mule. Around level 5, you're introduced to artisan skills at a camp area that contains various crafters. This is where I first encountered some annoyance, first with the game's UI, as vendors have 2 tabs for items and materials. I needed to buy a strap for a bag, but it was a bit confusing to find in the NPC UI. Next was the processing. I had to craft some thread. You set the craft and have to wait an arbitrary amount of time for the craft to complete. I really don't like crafting systems with arbitrary time sinks like this, as it doesn't really respect your time. After crafting the bag, I continued with the MSQ and had to kill a bandit for some pretty nice XP for my level. After eventually finding a group to kill him, I go to hand in the quest, but the NPC, Captain Redblade, was nowhere to be found. Everyone in the area was complaining about not being able to continue this quest line, so I logged out. I logged back in the next day, still no NPC, so I logged out again. Going into this, I had heard that the questing experience from levels 1 to 10 was fairly solid, so I was disappointed that it was so buggy. What made this even more frustrating is that it takes a long time to travel from A to B in Ashes due to the world being so huge. There's also a lot of multiple step quests, so when things do go wrong, it feels pretty bad. 2 days after getting the bugged quest, I logged back in and the NPC had finally spawned so I could hand in the quest. This time though, I came back to the game with a fresh mindset. Instead of questing and mob grinding to level up as quickly as possible, I'd try to take my time, learn the systems, and try a bit of everything for the sake of experiencing what the game currently has to offer. I tried getting into the crafting and gathering, and something I didn't notice at this point was gathering and crafting actually gives really solid XP in Ashes. On top of that, the gathering and crafting system is really unique in that every resource can come in its own rarity. So sometimes you'll be chopping wood, mining rocks, or AFK fishing, and you'll harvest an epic material which can be sold for good money. The higher the rarity of the resource, the more XP you'll get for that gather too, so it really does give you that good brain feeling. Eventually I made my way to the settlement of Jova, where I'd eventually become a citizen of the settlement. Here I learned I could take multiple commission quests for gathering to earn even more XP and money, and also stack these in a way that you can hand them in back to back. Even more good brain feeling. Later I started taking killing commissions and specifically targeting monsters that I'd encounter on my farming routes. On top of that, I could pop a 25% XP scroll to get that giga XP from handing in a full quest log all at once. The dopamine started to feel amazing, and one of the most positive things I've enjoyed about my time with Ashes of Creation so far is that leveling up solo seems to be a fairly viable path if you mix mob grinding with gathering, crafting, and commissions. I was finally getting that sandbox MMO feeling that I liked. The feeling that I'm thinking for myself and choosing my own leveling path rather than mindlessly following an MSQ. After getting comfortable with the crafting, gathering and commissions, it was time for me to make some money to buy gear upgrades. The best way to do this is via the crate system, which is intended to be a smaller scale alternative to caravans for solo players and small groups. Before you even craft a crate though, you'll want a mule, which is a mount designed specifically for crate transportation. Without a mule, you'll be moving one crate at a time on your back at walking speed. Mules allow you to carry one crate on your back and 1 or 2 crates on the mule, moving at 100% speed. I bought the trainable Daystrider crate mule from the herbalism vendor near the starting area, took it to an animal husbandry station, paid 75 silver to train the mount, then came back 30 minutes later to collect it. Next I needed to craft a crate. To do this, head to a market commodities vendor in a settlement. You'll need to purchase a commodity certificate either from the player market or directly from the vendor for something called node currency, which are obtained from delivering goods to a node's requisition agent. Then add lumber, stone and fish at the crafting station as well as the certificate to craft the crate. These crates can then be delivered to other settlements for gold. The further away the settlement, the more gold you'll make. Additionally, you can make higher rarity crates to make even more gold by obtaining a higher rarity certificate and filling it with the higher rarity resources. After crafting the crate, I ran it from Jova to Winstead and started making some money. For the next few levels, I was having a pretty good time with the gameplay loop of gathering, doing commissions and running crates back and forth for money. In my downtime, I'd do some AFK fishing, I'd scan the market for undervalued items to resell at a higher price, and if I wanted some combat, I'd do a bit of mob grinding. Aside from that, I also tried out the new sport fishing feature. You can start doing this really early on after crafting a rowboat at a carpentry station. It costs 50 of any wood to craft, so quite a low barrier to entry. After that, buy a fishing lure, find a sport fishing spot, cast your rod out and do a little mini game to catch your fish. Once the fish is caught, grab it from the water and it will appear on your back as a fish crate. Then head to the nearest harbour master to hand it in for gold. Overall, a really solid system, similar to the fishing system in Arcade. The only thing I'm not too sure of is needing to jump in the water to grab the fish, as it allows other players to just camp in the water and steal it without fishing themselves. Apparently this is the intended mechanic though, as it creates player friction. Since then I've played the game fairly casually, eventually getting to level 20 mostly from life skills and a bit of solo grinding. I have tried joining other groups to grind POIs, but usually these groups are full and I've found it difficult to be invited. Overall, my experience so far started out negative, but over time I've started to enjoy the game more and more despite the many issues it currently has. Next, let's bullet point the things that I like and dislike about Ashes so far, starting with the things I dislike that I hope will be improved. I dislike that you're able to loot another player's crate without becoming a flagged combatant, as you can exploit this system by using a low-level ult in trash gear to kill another player's mule, causing the crates to drop on the floor, then just swoop in on your main and steal the crates with no risk. There's a lot of guilds currently exploiting this, and it's basically zero risk, only reward for the attackers. So far I dislike the standard questing in Ashes. I think it's a combination of many of them feeling unrewarding, buggy and unintuitive. Some require travelling back and forth quite a distance too, so most of the time I feel like I'm just better off mob grinding or doing commissions. As much as I like the new mule and crate system, I dislike that it seems to have made caravans redundant. Everyone's running crates with mules due to less risk, and you rarely see people run caravans. I dislike the hunting system in its current state. I'm pretty sure it's unfinished, as you just go up to animals and pet them to either obtain hides or tame the animal. I think it feels weird that mount taming and obtaining hides is also done with the same gathering skill. I think it'd make more sense if you had a traditional separate skinning skill, then have animal taming or hunting be its own thing. The user interface lacks quality of life, such as being able to press enter to make confirmations, as well as needing to manually click on your character panel to drag crates into your storage. I think the UI looks good visually, it's just clunky to interact with. As much as the new player experience is improved, it doesn't really do a good job of putting players into sandbox MMO brain mode at the end of it. A WoW player following the MSQ is most likely going to feel lost once the standard questing dries up. I dislike the arbitrary time gate for processing, it disrupts the gameplay flow and wastes your time. The game's graphical fidelity is currently lacking by modern MMO standards, however, as I mentioned at the start, this is likely to improve massively once they lock the engine version. Even still, the character aesthetic and art style does seem to be a weak point. I dislike that your progress of gathering a rock or tree completely resets if you slightly move. I think it'd feel better if you could continue your gathering progress from where you left off. The map currently only displays crafting stations and buildings, but it doesn't display NPCs, and you don't have the ability to talk to a guard to get direction to an NPC. An example of this being an issue is with the artisan NPCs that you need to talk to in order to progress to apprentice and journeyman level. Logically, you would assume that these could be found in any major settlement, but they're only located in the starting area. The game should either have some kind of NPC locate feature like BDO, or you should be able to talk to a guard and get directions like in World of Warcraft. The monster tagging system is annoying for quests in that the first player to tag the monster gets all the rewards. This creates frustrating bottlenecks during the early questing. I dislike the floaty mount animations when turning left and right, and I hope this is improved later on. I think the character creator needs a lot of work, and I specifically dislike the slow fade in, fade out transitions when changing races, classes and genders. It'd look cleaner if it was just instant. There needs to be some kind of menu or dedicated storage for cosmetics, as it's annoying having them take up space in your already limited inventory and settlement storage. I think the player market system is a bit weird. Functionally, it's basically the same as an MMO auction house, but with very tedious search functionality. The player body blocking in settlements and safe zones is annoying. I can see there being some reason for it in open world PvP, but having it be a thing in settlements where there is no PvP feels rough. I think the punishment for death in PvP is so harsh that it makes me not want to engage in the system. The XP debt is bad enough, but having 1/4 of your materials deleted and 1/4 lootable is a bit much. There was one situation where I had a good back and forth PvP fight with another player. I killed him, he came back and killed me, I came back and killed him again to get my stuff back, but in the end it felt like we both lost. Having 1/4 of the materials deleted every death made it feel like PvP is only worth it if you can successfully gank someone, then quickly escape rather than having fun back and forth fights. Overall, I think the corruption system needs a lot of work, and it seems like a system that most PvP players are currently just trying to circumvent its intended design. I think XP for commissions and gathering should scale more relative to your level so that leveling via life skills continues to be a viable path of progression. Currently at level 17, it feels like I should really go group grind some mobs to level up, even though I much prefer the gameplay loop of gathering, crafting and commissions. And obviously I dislike all of the annoying bugs such as logging in and falling through the world, the storage NPCs not responding half the time, as well as the unstable performance, but this is all stuff that I would expect to be fixed over time. Next, let's discuss the things that I like so far about Ashes of Creation. Overall, I really like the combat, pressing my abilities feels good, and I like how you can upgrade debuffs to hard CC through various ability combos. I like that you've got the freedom to use any weapon and any armor type. Mages, for example, aren't locked to just using cloth. You might find some nice magical plate shoulder pads, for example, and you can equip them. I love the gathering system in that resources have different rarities. It's a unique system, and I also like that you can get some pretty good XP from just doing gathering and commissions in the early levels. Having the option to progress in multiple ways is what a sandbox MMO is all about. I think the settlement system overall is really cool. This is the game's big unique feature that sets it apart from other MMOs. It's still not in a fully complete state, but seeing settlements go from a small crossroads to a town, then contributing to the construction of buildings feels really cool. I actually like that the world is extremely vast and distance matters. The world needs to be big for the crate system to work, but just opening the map and seeing these undeveloped settlement locations, and knowing that they could eventually grow into a town if the adjacent settlements get destroyed, is just really cool. I like the sport fishing feature. This was one of my favourite aspects of Arcade, so I'm happy to see it be a thing in Ashes. I like the Destiny board, and I think this system could be expanded upon to further enhance the new player experience. Perhaps add an exploration Destiny board that rewards you for visiting each POI in the world, for example. I like the crate system as a whole, even though it needs to be better balanced alongside caravans and the corruption system. I like that epic and legendary gear in Ashes feels truly epic due to being very hard and time consuming to obtain. I actually like that you need to figure out the best way to level up yourself rather than just mindlessly following an MSQ. I like that the game feels highly player driven, and I've already had some memorable player encounters. One cool moment was seeing a player whose mule was killed by an NPC. I stole his crate, he was tilted at me for stealing it, so instead I offered to transport it to the nearest settlement for him in exchange for half the profit, which turned into a positive social experience. Aside from that, you've also got the constant possibility of PvP, and the game feels unpredictable, which keeps you on your toes. As much as dying does feel really punishing, sometimes too punishing, one upside of this is that you do feel more engaged when participating in PvE. If you've got a lot of resources, you really don't want to die. It almost feels like hardcore WoW at times. And I like that the world feels dangerous. I actually think it's cool that there's random high-level elite mobs patrolling around settlements to keep you on your toes during your crate runs. Overall, I think a lot of the issues Ashes of Creation currently has are definitely fixable, and I do think the game will eventually become a great game for people who enjoyed MMOs like Albion Online, Arcade, Mortal Online 2, OSRS, EVE Online, and Black Desert Online. Before we move on to the next topic, I just want to share some additional thoughts I wrote down whilst leveling that didn't really fit into this section. You start out with a fairly hand-holdy leveling experience, similar to something that's typical of a theme park MMO, where you just follow the MSQ, but when that starts to end and you need to find your own ways to gain XP, players are stuck in theme park MMO brain, and it's hard to make the switch to sandbox MMO brain of creating your own goals. You encounter a lot of quit moments early in the game, buggy questing, confusing UI when first talking to the crafting vendor, difficulty locating NPCs, not being able to open your storage, dying, and realizing that not only do you lose XP, but you also lose half of your materials. The strengths of Ashes don't become apparent until most players have gone through one or two quit moments. People are saying the game has hardly changed in the past year because a lot of the stuff that has been added is later game stuff that a small percentage of the player base interacts with. From the perspective of someone who has only played for a couple of hours, not too much has seemingly changed. I really love that you're able to gain XP from gathering, but you don't gain any XP from delivering crates. I think it would feel good if you actually did. The XP could be more or less depending on the distance, similar to how it works with the gold you receive. Was it too early for Ashes of Creation to come to Steam Early Access? The Steam announcement really came out of nowhere, and many people, including die-hard supporters of the game, were worried it was too early to be introduced to a casual mass audience. Honestly, this was my concern too. I was worried that Ashes would get destroyed so hard in the reviews that it wouldn't be able to recover. At this point, it's been a few weeks, the dust has settled, and it's sitting at mixed reviews with 63% positive overall in all languages and 55% for English reviews. If you asked me during the first week of early access if it was too early, my answer would have definitely been yes. However, now I've actually changed my mind. In hindsight, I think coming to Steam Early Access now will likely have been the best move for Ashes in the long run, as the feedback they've received from this more casual audience has probably been a serious wake-up call. I don't think the game would have got the same number of active players jumping into it if they'd have just opened up testing for free on their own launcher. I also don't think as many casual players would have played the game past level 10 if they didn't release on Steam Early Access. Intrepid are now getting the experience of servicing a live 24/7 MMO with server queues, schedule maintenance, and live updates. I think it's a case of short-term pain for long-term gain. It's better to completely overwhelm the servers now in a more realistic environment than these short-term playtests, so that persistent issues can actually be addressed with the widest data set of players possible. In hindsight, the reviews themselves aren't even as bad as I expected. I think the game can absolutely recover from mixed if they can fulfill their vision. And in terms of player retention, it's actually looking really good. I was definitely expecting much more of a drop-off. If Intrepid can be quick to make updates, fix bugs, listen to player feedback, and add content, I honestly think the game will be fine. Next, let's discuss the negativity surrounding Ashes of Creation. Before and during the Steam Early Access release, the sentiment surrounding Ashes was probably the worst it has ever been. Reddit was especially bad. Almost every negative post about the game was instantly upvoted to the top of r/mmorpg. And it was a level of dogpiling and blind hatred that I haven't seen before in over a decade of covering the MMO genre on YouTube. I think the negativity surrounding the game comes down to a few factors. I think many long-term fans and supporters of Ashes turned against the project leading up to and during the Steam Early Access release, because this is an MMO that they'd been defending online for many, many years, and now it's widely available in a state that many people perceive to be too early for widespread public consumption. People who have hyped Ashes up for years to their gaming friends probably felt embarrassed that the game that they've been hyping up and supporting for so long would be coming to Steam in this state. They probably felt like they lost face to their gaming friends who will be going into it expecting a product that's much closer to completion than what's in reality. And to be fair, these people are completely justified in feeling this way, in my opinion. Next, you've got the WoW killer crowd, people who play theme park MMOs like WoW and Final Fantasy XIV, and have been hoping that Ashes would be a game that would compete with the big popular theme parks. These are people who would log into the game, follow the early questing experience, then complain that there's nothing to do once that early questing experience ends, and the game stops telling you what to do. Fundamentally, this game was never going to be for these people. Basically, all of their feedback boils down to make it more like WoW. To be fair, with the amount of exposure and hype this game has had over the years, it is to be expected that most of the players following Ashes are theme park MMO players, because they simply make up the vast majority of the MMO audience. If your game fundamentally doesn't appeal to a majority of MMO fans, then there's naturally going to be a negative bias, especially when the penny drops and you're thrown into a world where you need to make your own goals, death is punished, and player friction is a common theme. Finally, you've got the people who like the idea of Ashes, but the game's just taken so long to make that they've kinda lost interest, which is fair enough. I can't speak on what difficulties Intrepid have encountered during development, but it's been a long 8 years since I first started covering this game on YouTube. MMOs typically don't share anything or even announce they exist until they're fairly deep into development, but Ashes has been doing their monthly dev live streams for literally 7 years at this point. It's fair to say that over the years there's been times where they've misrepresented the progress of the game to make it seem like it's further in development than it actually was. But at the same time, some of the systems they're trying to tie together in this game, such as settlements, are extremely complex and haven't been done before. They've been trying to get dynamic gridding to work, they're constantly upgrading to the latest version of Unreal Engine, and this is essentially a studio led by someone who hasn't made a game before. There's a lot of reasons for why Ashes is taking a long time to make, but in all fairness, it does seem like progress has sped up a lot in the past year. For all these reasons I mentioned, it's understandable why sentiment around the game is so negative, but I think the worst is probably over and it should be onwards and upwards from here, fingers crossed. Final segment, who is Ashes of Creation actually for? What type of MMO player does this game appeal to? Ashes of Creation will have some sort of appeal to you if you enjoyed MMOs like Albion Online, Arcade, Mortal Online 2, OSRS, EVE Online, Black Desert Online, Ultima Online, Throne of Liberty, PAX Day, and Worm Online. If you didn't really enjoy any of those games, it's fundamentally most likely not going to be an MMO for you. This game isn't a WoW killer because it's not trying to be. It's not trying to be an alternative to games like Final Fantasy XIV, WoW, ESO, or Star Star Wars The Old Republic. It may have some similar elements to those games, but design-wise it's completely different. Ashes is trying to be an MMO where players create their own goals, and your experience leveling through the world is unique to you based on your own decisions. The main enemy of the world isn't going to be some NPC, but probably some guild that's terrorizing the land by seizing power and raising the tax rate. A game where the stories told about it are centered around conflict or cooperation between players, not some pre-written linear story that has a set conclusion. Some people will hate that. In fact, given that most popular MMOs are linear story-driven theme parks, most people will hate that. But it's certainly got an audience that I definitely consider myself a part of. So if Ashes sounds like a game that's for you, do I recommend buying it now? No, not yet. I'd recommend waiting for at least one big update, possibly several, to fix all of the major common bugs. If you've got the patience of a saint and actively want to test and look for bugs, then go for it. You'll be rewarded with a special mount if you submit a replicatable bug report. But to conclude, I have changed my mind about it being too early for Ashes to come to Steam Early Access. I actually think it'll be good in the long run. I don't think the game's a scam, because the idea of a scam is to make money, and they've spent so much money developing the game at this point that the only way out of that hole is to deliver a successful game. My first impressions started off quite negative in the early game, but eventually improved as I played more, learning about the crafting, gathering, and commissions. Overall, in its current state as an unfinished game, I'd rate it a 5 out of 10. And despite the negative sentiment, I'm actually quite optimistic that Ashes will become a really solid MMO over the next couple of years for fans of sandbox style MMOs. But that's it for this video. As always, let me know your thoughts on Ashes of Creation's Steam Early Access release in the comments below. Subscribe to the channel for more Ashes coverage, and if you want to buy the game and support the channel, then use my referral code on screen or in the description. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.